A future king steps through the heavy doors of a private drawing room at Windsor Castle. Inside, a meeting months in the making is about to begin. Every senior figure of the royal family is present, gathered in a semicircle. The agenda is massive: to resolve a quiet, bitter power struggle that has been circling the House of Windsor for over a year. The chairs are arranged, the tea is served, and the entire atmosphere has been meticulously crafted to feel warm, informal, and deeply familial. Except Prince William does not sit down. He does not greet his father. He does not say hello to his stepmother. He does not even unbutton his coat. Instead, William stands near the threshold, scans the room in a single razor-sharp sweep, and locks eyes with a woman standing quietly by the window. In under 60 seconds, before a single word of opening dialogue can be spoken, Prince William turns on his heel, walks right back out the door, and cancels the entire summit on the spot. He did not raise his voice. He did not start a shouting match. He did not demand an explanation in front of the gathered family. He simply deprived them of the one thing the entire room had been built to extract: his presence. Because in that single fleeting glance, William realized he had not been invited to a private family conversation. He had walked into a legal ambush. Standing near that window was a person who had no business being in a private family gathering. She was not a palace official representing the crown. She was not an advisor to the royal household. She was Queen Camilla's personal, private solicitor. And the moment William clocked exactly who she was, he understood the real machinery operating beneath the surface of that room. To understand why a single lawyer standing by a window can detonate a royal summit in less than a minute, you have to understand how this family actually works when the stakes become existential. In the corporate or political world, meetings happen every day. But in the House of Windsor, a summit is an event of absolute last resort. It is a rare, heavily planned, high-stakes gathering, convened only when normal administrative channels have completely failed and a monumental decision must be made. There is a clear precedent for this. Back in January 2020, when Prince Harry and Meghan Markle announced they were stepping back from royal duties, the late Queen Elizabeth did not manage the crisis through letters or phone calls. She summoned Charles, William, and Harry to Sandringham for what the world came to know as the Sandringham Summit. 4 senior royals sat in one room for hours, hammering out the brutal legal, financial, and institutional terms of that exit. That event set the template. When the future of the monarchy is on the line, you get everyone face to face and you settle it. So when word began circulating within palace corridors that a private summit was being arranged at Windsor, everyone who understood the inner workings of the institution knew what it meant. Something massive was being negotiated. And this time, the subject was the future. Specifically, what happens to the shape of the family, to certain royal properties, and to financial allocations once King Charles's reign comes to an end. You have to hold the backdrop of recent years in mind, because it is what gave this summit its urgent pressure cooker atmosphere. Ever since King Charles was diagnosed with cancer in early 2024, the emotional and political temperature inside the royal family changed permanently, while the king continued his public duties and treatments through sheer determination. That diagnosis introduced an unmentionable, terrifying factor into every long-term strategy: a ticking clock. Questions that the institution had comfortably left vague for years, questions about who controls which estates, where certain people stand, and how power is distributed once the reign changes hands, suddenly stopped being theoretical. They acquired a deadline, and nothing focuses the mind of a court quite like a clock it cannot stop. That was the pressure this summit was born out of. Not a public crisis in the tabloids, but a quiet, deep, structural panic over what happens next. 2. Even the choice of location was loaded with psychological engineering. This family has several stages it can use, and each one sends a completely different message. A meeting at Buckingham Palace is state business formal, institutional, recorded by private secretaries. A meeting at Clarence House is Charles's personal headquarters, the king's home ground. But Windsor is the ancient heart of the family. It is a place soaked in generations of private history, the setting they reach for when they want an issue to feel less like government business and more like blood. Choosing Windsor was a deliberate tactic. It was designed to send a subconscious signal to William: come as a son, not as a rival. Leave your legal guard at the door. This is family. That framing was not innocent. The more a room is dressed up to feel like family, the lower your guard drops. And a dropped guard was the entire strategy. The summit was framed for months as a soft, informal family gathering senior family members and a few trusted household advisors coming together for an off-the-record discussion before anything was ever put into formal paperwork. That framing mattered because it dictated how everyone was expected to behave. A family conversation is loose. You say things you would never put in writing. You offer warm verbal accommodations to keep the peace. You make gestures of goodwill because you are talking to your father, not an adversary. And here is the detail that breaks the entire strategy open. Prince William had been provided with a version of the guest list weeks in advance. That lawyer's name was not on it. She had been added quietly at the last minute, or simply omitted altogether, which means the success of the plan actively depended on William not knowing she would be present until he was already inside the room, sitting down with the tea poured. Think about what that reveals about the intent behind the summit. If her presence were routine, if she were simply there for some ordinary, above-board reason, her name would have been disclosed up front. You disclose the harmless things. You hide the detail that only works if the other person is caught off guard. The fact that she was kept off the advance schedule is the undeniable fingerprint of a trap. Somebody understood that if William knew a private lawyer would be present, he would never set foot in the castle that day. So they made sure he would not know until it was too late to back out. Except it was not too late, because William saw her before his weight even touched a chair. Standing near the window was Queen Camilla's personal solicitor, not a palace legal advisor who serves the institution, but the specific individual who represents Camilla's private financial and personal interests. There is an enormous, impassable ocean between a family conversation and a legal proceeding, and the line dividing them is marked by the presence of private counsel. A palace legal advisor owes their duty to the crown, to the state, and to the continuity of the monarchy. But a private solicitor owes their allegiance solely to their client. The moment a private solicitor is standing in the room, it is no longer a chat. It is an active negotiation. Anything said in that room becomes something that can be transcribed, witnessed, and referred back to. An informal nod of agreement stops being a warm family gesture and becomes something a lawyer can later document as tacit consent. William looked at that woman standing quietly by the window and understood instantly that he had been invited into a room disguised as one thing in order to manufacture another. The speed of that realization is the most extraordinary part of this entire story. Most people walking into a warm room surrounded by family would have noticed the unfamiliar face and thought nothing of it an assistant, a guest, a new member of staff. Most people extend the benefit of the doubt because the warm environment tricks them into relaxing. William did the opposite in a single glance. He saw a face he recognized, placed her exact role as Camilla's personal solicitor, and ran the entire calculation instantly. Her private lawyer is here at a family meeting. She was kept off the schedule, and she is positioned quietly to observe. Individually, those facts might have an excuse. Stacked together, they spelled one word: negotiation. He did not need anyone to explain the agenda. He did not need to hear an opening speech. The unannounced presence of that specific person in that specific role was the agenda. He read the entire summit off one face before taking 3 steps into the room. That reaction shows a man who has developed a razor-sharp sixth sense for the shape of a court trap. It also reveals the terrifying reality of the current relationship between those two households. the total, complete erosion of trust. For William to read an ambush off a single glance, the fundamental trust between his camp and Camilla's side must be completely gone. He did not wonder if there was an innocent explanation. He did not give it a beat to see how things played out. His instant, reflexive assumption was that he was being played. He understood that the trap was not merely what would be said during the afternoon. The trap was the room itself. If he sat down, if he engaged, if he let the family conversation proceed with that private solicitor quietly taking notes by the window, then whatever came out of it, any softening of his stance, any sympathetic phrase uttered to his ailing father, any moment where he seemed to go along with a proposal just to avoid a scene, could later be framed as his binding consent, witnessed by counsel. The only way to defeat a trap built out of a room is to refuse the room. So he left. He took away the one element the entire exercise depended on, his presence in a chair, on the record. To understand what that lawyer was actually brought into that room to secure, you have to look at the situation from Queen Camilla's perspective. Strip away the royal titles for a moment, and you see a situation driven by a very real, very human dread. When King Charles passes away, Camilla's reality changes overnight, and not in her favor. She transitions from queen consort to dowager queen. Right now, as queen consort, Camilla stands at the absolute center of royal authority. The grand residences, the state support, the staff, the institutional weight, all of it flows to her because her husband is on the throne. But almost none of that power belongs to her independently. It is borrowed, and the day Charles dies, that loan is called in instantly. The machinery of state, the control of crown properties, and the vast resources of the Duchy of Cornwall transfer immediately to the new king, William. Camilla becomes a widow living in a world controlled by a stepson with whom she has shared a complex, guarded, and often frosty relationship for over 25 years. She has watched up close how this family treats those who drift to its edges once their central role is finished. She knows that the moment Charles is gone, her standing, her housing, her finances, and her influence will depend entirely on the goodwill of a man who has no personal or emotional reason to be generous to her. Her desire to lock in permanent arrangements while Charles is alive is not necessarily born out of pure greed. It is the natural instinct of someone looking at a precipice they know is coming, trying desperately to build a wall before the storm arrives. And the tragedy of her situation is the timing. Her leverage exists only while Charles is alive and well enough to lend his authority to her cause. Every day, his health remains a question mark. Her window of opportunity narrows. She was not just afraid of the future, she was terrified of the clock. And Charles wanted to build that wall for her. Put yourself in his position as well. Here is a man facing his own mortality with terrifying clarity, who spent decades fighting the institution and the public just to be with this woman. He watched her absorb years of public vilification at his side. The thing he wants most, in whatever time he has left, is the certainty that she will be safe when he is gone, that she will not be diminished, sidelined, or left to the mercy of a court that never fully accepted her. That is not a villainous plot. That is a husband trying to protect his wife from a future he will not be there to soften. So Charles lent his sovereign weight to the summit, not to betray his son, but as a father and husband trying to solve an impossible equation, how to protect his wife, when the only person with the power to protect her after his death is the one person least inclined to do so. Sources close to the household indicate that the documents waiting on that table were designed to establish what royal insiders softly call continuity arrangements. On paper, continuity sounds gentle and responsible, but in practice, this proposed agreement was structured to lock in major binding guarantees past the end of Charles's reign. First, it sought to guarantee Camilla's long-term, irrevocable tenure over specific prime royal residences, removing those properties from William's future control as king. Second, It aimed to establish a protected, independent financial allocation that William could not alter or reduce through the Duchy of Cornwall. And third, the detail that would have set off every alarm in William's head, it sought to secure an ongoing, formal patron role that would give her continued influence in family matters even after Charles was gone. Think about those demands from William's perspective. A future king cannot allow the previous king's widow to hold a pre-agreed, legally witnessed claim on residences, funds, and roles that he is constitutionally supposed to control. That is not continuity. That is a mortgage taken out on his own reign before it has even begun, executed by the one person he would never choose to grant it to.